Hi everyone, and welcome to week 16 of our Sweet Childhood Memory Sew-Along, hosted by Pat Sloan at her website, ilovetomakequilts.com. This week we have a rather interesting block to make, and I have actually made it in two separate ways. The one for this tutorial is as per the pattern, but the one I'm putting into my quilt, I made a few little changes to, and you'll see that at the end of the video. If you haven't done so already, jump over to Pat's website, download this week's free pattern, come back here, and I'll show you how to do it. On the table in front of me are all the pieces and parts as per the pattern. We need to make a few lots of half square triangles first, and then we have some other little pieces as fillers to complete the block. To make the half square triangles, we take our background squares and we draw a diagonal line from corner to corner in one direction. We also need to do this for a medium and dark fabric, so we'll draw our diagonal line on our medium fabric. We then pair these all up right sides together with the remaining squares, and we take them to the machine and we sew 1/4 of an inch on each side of our drawn line. With all those pieces now sewn together, we just need to clip these units apart, and as I'm doing now, we just give that a quick press to set all the seams before we take our rotary cutter and we slice these in half on our drawn line. We will then take all of these and press to the darker of the two fabrics. We now need to trim down all of our half square triangle units to the size directed in the pattern. As you may or may not be aware, I prefer to do this 2 at a time, and what I do is I make sure that that seam is nice and snugly nested. I then take my 6.5 inch square ruler and I place the diagonal line from that ruler on my stitching line. I then double check and make sure that I have enough fabric outside my required trim down measurement before trimming the first two sides. We then rotate this block and we place the ruler back on, making sure that our diagonal line is once again along our stitching. But in this instance, we can place our required trim down size on our freshly cut sides and then trim the final two sides. Repeat this for all of your half square triangle units. It's now time to lay our block out as per our pattern before starting to make little quadrants first of all, and then moving on to the final construction of the block. As you can see me doing here, I am paying attention to the inset in the top left hand corner and laying my pieces out as required. From here, what I'll do is separate this into 4 quadrants and make 4 lots of 4 patches before moving towards final construction of the block, which in itself will also be a 4 patch. First we'll sew all of the vertical seams and then our horizontal seams for each of our corners, and I'll meet you back when we're at the pressing station. With all the vertical seams sewn for all of these 4 patch units, we're going to take it to the pressing mat. Now for each of these units, make sure that you press your top and bottom half in the same directions on all 4 quadrants. What we'll do once we've sewn these in our 2 opposite directions, giving us a nesting seam, is take this to the machine and sew our horizontal seam. We'll do this for each one as we go. Remember, please ensure that you sew your top and bottom, press your top and bottom sections in the same direction on all 4 of these quadrants. It is important later. With all of those sections sewn, to press these ones out, what we're going to do is swirl this seam in the middle so that we can get the flattest block possible. What you need to do is unpick the few stitches that are above that stitching line that we just created with our horizontal seam, and then make sure that all of your seam allowances are going in the right direction. What this does is swirl that center little spot and puts all the seam allowances in each 4 quadrant, and it makes it nice and flat. Do this for all 4 quadrants and I'll meet you back once that's done. Now that we have all 4 quadrants made, it's time to lay this out, and the final block goes together as a simple 4-patch. If you've followed all my pressing directions along the way, you will find that every single one of your seam allowances here nests for the complete construction. Do not follow my layout as you see me doing here, as I have it laid out incorrectly. My bottom 2 blocks are turned around, and I don't realize this until I go to do the horizontal seam. Do not follow my example. You have been warned. Once again, to control the bulk of this inner section, we are going to swirl this little seam as well. To do this, we just unpick the few stitches that are above our vertical stitching line in this case, before opening up the fabric and making sure that all of the seam allowances are going in the same direction. In this example, it is anti-clockwise. This will sit nicely with the other 2 that we swirled earlier, as you could see, and then we give this a final press from the front to set that seam in. To make sure that this seam actually sets fully, we will use the wooden clapper, which is the tool that I have in my videos all the time. A few people have asked me about it and I have forgotten to go over it. What the clapper does is it adds a little bit of weight to the fabric, but it also pulls the heat out of the fabric to set that seam nice and snugly. We'll repeat this now with our other quadrant before doing our horizontal seam. Please note, I still haven't worked out that I've sewn this together incorrectly. With those sections now done, we just have to do the horizontal seam, and it looks like I still haven't noticed that I've got these sections sewn together incorrectly. When will I notice? Who can say? But once again, if you have followed all of the pressing directions along the way, all of these seam allowances will nest. Yes, they will do it when sewn together correctly as well. And we'll sew our horizontal seam. Let's hope after this one, I figure it out. Mr. Oblivious here, as I still haven't even worked out that I've done this incorrectly. But what we are going to do is once again swirl all three of these intersections. I just like to do this. You don't have to. You can press to one side. So I'm doing the swirling of the seams the same way that I've done all the others. And when I flip this over to give it a press, bingo! He finally notices that it's wrong. So let's unpick that bottom section, fix it up, and I will show you the way that the block is supposed to look. Once again, as I did before, we're just going to swirl all three of these seams to get the flattest block possible, and this time when we have a final press, our block for this week will be done. Remember, even though I sewed my sections together incorrectly, if you follow all the steps and you follow all the pressing directions, you will get a perfect block. Thanks for joining me again this week, folks. As I said, I made this in two separate ways. So up here on that one, you'll see the block that I made for my actual quilt. This was made just slightly differently to the one from this tutorial. And if you'd like to know how I did it, let me know in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next week.